Welcome to another episode of Mommy Mondays with Jen Pinto and Tanisha Vargas. I have a special guest today that I am honored that I have been a part of her life for the past 30 years. That's crazy when I think about that. But anyways, this special person is one of my best friends. And today's topic is a very interesting topic that needs to be spoken about way more, and that is being a parent to a needs child. So Marlene is her name. She is also an author. She's a mother. She's a wife. She's a businesswoman. And she has started a beautiful movement to raise more awareness when it comes to special needs children and how people can navigate through that lifestyle as parents. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, ladies, for having me. I am honored to be a part of this and eager to spread some more information.
Nice. Okay. So, you know what? I think we can get to it. Like, tell everybody about your story, with your second child and how things were very different from the first one and how that changed you.
Well, I had my first one when I was very young. So I did what I thought was the best thing. I waited for the American dream, the homeowner, the wife, the title, the financial stability. I was very cautious in my pregnancy, did everything by the book. And when I went to go deliver my child naturally, I was able to have such a beautiful delivery experience. I was higher risk because I have a couple of my own medical conditions. So I got to see my child via ultrasound in the last trimester, I want to say weekly. No red flags whatsoever. And when I delivered my son, I physically never had the opportunity to carry him outside of when he came out of my womb because I pulled him out myself. Other than that, they whisked him away and he went straight into the intensive care unit. And it was a surprise to me. So that we're going to start with, that was a big shock. I went my entire pregnancy thinking that I was right age, right mind, healthy, doing everything by the book. And then no red flags. And he wasn't breathing well. He was born with an extra digit, which was his thumb, fully like a full bone. And more because of the breathing is why they send them to ICU. And then when he was in ICU, we discovered a whole bunch of other issues.
Mm. So who was in the room with you when you gave birth?
At the time, my husband, his father, my daughter at that age was 14, and my cousin, and my midwife.
So, like, does it feel like that whole moment was like a dream? Like, what was happening? Did it even feel real?
So, when they say things are too good to be true, now when I look back, they were too good to be true. Like, I'm going to roll it back 48 hours before I deliver my child. I was feeling like my water broke. So I went to the hospital because I leaked what I thought was my water. Not a lot, but it doesn't have to be a lot because I've been there before. So I went to the hospital. When I'm at the hospital, in the emergency room, they have a little test, like a little smear that they check you and they can tell if it's amniotic fluid, what it is, what it's not. And they said, nope, must have been some urine. All right, I got leakage. Okay. So, you're on these monitors. And while I'm there, let's say 40 minutes, because I guess there's a standard amount of time when a pregnant woman enters an ER that I didn't know about until that occurrence. They can't just let you go. Even though they realize it was not my water, they have to have you on the monitors for a certain period of time. I guess for fetal movement, things like that. They didn't feel the baby move enough. So I was a little worried, but they made it seem like, no, this happens all the time. We'll be right back. They came with a little device that looked like a Doppler, you know, those portable ones. I'm like, okay, they're going to listen to the heartbeat another way. Well, no. She said, this is not going to hurt. I'm just going to put the machine on your stomach and it's going to give it like a vibration. And then the baby's going to react to the vibration. We see this movement that we need to see, and you go home. I said, okay, no problem. It was more like a taser.
Oh my God.
So it felt like a taser. I don't know the name of it, the legal name of it, but it felt like they shocked my stomach twice. My baby moved. Yeah, they shocked my stomach twice. Of course, my baby's going to move. It went all over the place. And I'm not going to say of course, because God forgive me, they might be moms that have experienced no movement, even with that, you know? I went home after that. I wasn't in any pain, but I was subconsciously worried about my child that just had this happen to them.
Right.
The next day I see my doctor like I normally do on a weekly basis. And my high risk doctor says, what? The ER never called me when you were in the ER. I would have never let you go home. I would have made you have the baby right then and there because I am 37 weeks to the day that Monday. So, you know, I'm at the time that I need to be to have the baby, but he said, no movement is a red flag. Why would I let you go home? And why would I do that? I would have never used the machine on you. So he says, do me a favor, get your bag, call your husband, go to the hospital. You need to have this baby. He didn't even check me right there. He said, just go to the hospital. I'm going to call the hospital. We're going to be ready for you.
Wow.
I thought that my son had no medical issues, and I'm going to tell you why. Because this was on the 15th of April. And I told the doctor, can I be admitted to the hospital today, but not delivered today? And he said, why? And I said, because today is tax day, and I don't want my child to be born on the day that taxes are due. And he laughed. And he said, okay, you could stay in the hospital tonight, but we're inducing you first thing in the morning. He let me go to the hospital. I slept there. I'm being monitored. I really think nothing is wrong with my child. The doctor doesn't think anything is wrong with my child. Had I known that I had a child with a lot of medical issues, you think I care about tax day? I want my baby out.
Yeah.
And I sat there in the hospital and delivered the baby on the 16th, a day later.
Wow. Do you feel that whatever was done maybe played a part, not to say as a whole, but a part in the severity of it?
I will never know.
Right.
And I learned to block that, because thinking that could that shock have caused developmental delay? Maybe, right? But my son came out with so many anomalies, facial anomalies, things that happened while he was developing in the womb months ago. So that gives me peace of mind that my son was going to be who he is regardless.
Good point. Yeah. No, real shit. Denise, do you have any questions?
I actually wanted to ask, once you found out that your son had certain medical issues or anything that we consider quote unquote wrong with the baby, what did you have to do to prepare to get the baby home?
Well, first, they whisk your child away. And that instantly, you have everybody surrounding you, my loved ones, my mom, everybody comes in the room and they're like, no, this is protocol. If they see any little red flag, they're going to jump on it. Don't worry. I start boohoo crying over the finger. The finger to doctors on paper is a red flag. But me and my background, I am Dominican and Puerto Rican, my parents, and Dominican Republic is known, I'm sorry about that, is known to have certain medical conditions that are more rare in other countries, but are common in Dominican Republic. and having an extra digit is common.
Really?
Wow.
It's common. So it's common in like 2 or 3 different countries, but not like a little nub, that you can put a rubber band around and it can fall off. I'm talking about a full-fledged bone, full out nail, an extra digit, like a whole nother thumb. He had 2 thumbs on one hand. I cried about that more cosmetically and the fear of that, not knowing that was a red flag for a lot of other things. Because in that era, I would have Googled these things. But my son's grandfather had an extra thumb. He never removed it. So I said, oh, that's hereditary. He got it from his grandfather.
And there was nothing wrong with him?
The grandfather had nothing wrong with him. Gosh. Nothing, not developmentally, not physically, nothing ever wrong with him besides an extra finger that he chose and his family chose never to remove.
Okay. So
for me was, now I have to prepare. I have my child in ICU. My family's telling me, oh, it's okay. This is, protocol. But to be able to see my child, I had to go into that room. I had to go in, extra cautious, extra clean, everything. It hit me, I probably want to say after 48 hours, where the doctors are discharging you, but not discharging my child. Oh my God. That's where it hit me. To give birth in the month of April and to not bring your son home into the month of May.
So you would be every day? Like going to the house?
At one point, I ended up going home, but for the first week, I was sleeping where residents would sleep. I had nice doctors that said, look, I got a cot over here, because they knew I was refusing. I would stand up and I would just cry and fall asleep standing up, but I'm not leaving. Right. And they were like, and I lived, when I tell you minutes away from the hospital, I lived minutes away from the hospital, but I needed to literally, I couldn't leave. I just couldn't leave. I just felt like, I felt mom guilt. If I left and something happened in those 3 hours that I'm gone, I would forever hold that.
Mm-hmm. Get it. So what happens afterwards?
So while I'm there, they bring all kinds of specialists, and then they tell me, my son was not sucking or swallowing, which means he could not drink milk. He could not take a pacifier. I couldn't breastfeed because of my medical conditions and medicine that I have to take. So I couldn't give, my son the breast, but he couldn't even bottle feed. He needed to be under the light for his jaundice. He needed the machine because he couldn't breathe on his own. We had to put a tube so that he could eat. And that in itself, he did a lot of firsts in ICU, which was really hard for me. Wow. I thought, why me? Why now? Having had a child when I was younger, teenage years, extremely irresponsible, no preparation whatsoever, no ultrasounds, like one ultrasound, I think, my entire pregnancy. And I gave birth to a healthy, perfect child. And here I am doing things in my mind by the book to the T. And I got hit with all of this. I didn't even know what to do. I went home. They said, your child has a genetic condition. By the features on his face, we believe you need to see a geneticist. I said, okay. I still did not go home and Google. I didn't even ask, what features do you see? Why? Because they were not the geneticists. So I'm going to waste my energy, get my brain going for a doctor that's not going to help me once we leave here. This is the hospital. I need to find somebody else outside. I found someone in a children's hospital. I go with my mom to this appointment. I'm just happy I have my son at this point. I don't care what the doctors tell me, right? He's home. He's with me. He's no longer on a tube. He's being bottle fed. He's doing well. He's gaining weight. All the things you're looking for in a healthy baby. When I saw my son in the beginning, you know, you always say, my mom says it in Spanish and it's so bad, but she says something in the likings of every parent finds their little, I'm not even going to use the term that she uses because it just sounds wrong, but every parent finds their child beautiful or handsome.
Yes.
Meaning that they don't come out always looking great. They don't from the womb. Sometimes, you know, they get vacuumed, their head is cone shaped, their nose is twisted, you know, they're puffy. But when he came out, I was like, oh, he looks kind of, you know, different. Got a lot of hair like me, but he looks, you know, something is different. Not in a genetic or medical condition way. I thought ethnically he looked different. He looked more like he was Central American versus Caribbean, Dominican, Puerto Rican. Mm-hmm. And his father is 100% Dominican. So the doctors came in and even asked me, was the father Asian because of his eyes? And I said, no, the father's Dominican. Well, you know, in the Dominican Republic, we have a lot of Asian people that live there, like straight Asian, straight. And I said, no, father's straight Dominican. Okay. I go to the geneticist finally, and I go in brave face, ready for what I think is going to be a typical appointment. He's going to tell me maybe my son has, I don't know, anything. It doesn't matter at this point. I'm not thinking nothing of it. He looks at me. He looks at my son. He does all kind of measurements. So you guys are moms and, you know, you take your kid to the doctor. They normally now in this era, they give you an iPad and say, hey, fill this out. Yeah. Does your kid, you know, make eye contact with you? Does your kid move their head? Does you do tummy time? Little things like that. Well, when you see a geneticist, it is not that kind of appointment. They are measuring your eyes, the shape, your eyelids, your eyebrows. They are measuring your ears, how they fall on your face. So our eyes are perfectly aligned with our ears.
Wow.
It is like one of those beautiful miracles of whoever you believe in, right? Where your glasses and your eyesight is perfectly aligned with your ears. If your ears are set high, it is a problem. If your ears are set low, it is a problem. My son has low set ears. Our nose, nostrils to be exact, are of a certain width. So if you touch with your little fingertip, a nice little bit like thick, feels like a good piece of cartilage, you know. Well, when they're thin, it is a problem. I didn't know that. My son has them extremely thin. His nose was considered, which is still considered this, and it is a red flag, beaked shape like a bird. It is at an angle and it has a point that goes down. His palate inside his mouth is too high. That was a problem. His eyelids, and this is the example I like to give when it comes to the eyes. When we're young, we don't realize this, but when you're older, if you know one person with Down syndrome, you can kind of point out a lot of people with Down syndrome because their eyes are shaped the same.
Right.
No matter the nationality, you can point them out a little bit, right? So his eyes have a downward slant, not an upward, but a downward slant. That's not normal. So it is known in the Asian culture, but it is not known in the Hispanic culture. So if it was a Caucasian person, African American, it is a red flag because it's not part of, you know, who we are and how we are made. They look at his forehead. So his in his cranium, it didn't close. So it had like a point. It didn't heal properly. I didn't realize that my son had that. It healed over the years, which they told me about 4 or 5 years old, but I didn't realize that. In the middle of his chest, it was completely caved in, like a sunken hole. And there's a name for that. It's called peptis. I didn't realize that. So when he saw all these things on him, here I am thinking it's just a thumb. And he pointed out all these extra things. I'm probably missing a lot. Walked out the room, typed all these things into a system, I guess. Came back and said, I've seen cases like this before. It's a very, very rare condition, but I want to prepare you that I believe your son has, and he dropped a name to a condition. I heard it, but I guess I wasn't listening. And he said, this is a rare condition. Children don't make it till their teen years. It is the number one and the hardest version of childhood leukemia. So it was called Fanconi anemia. And it wasn't clicking. Right. He said to me, do you recall ever seeing a movie called My Sister's Keeper? And I said, oh my God. Not only did I see that movie many years ago, but I went to the movies to see it, and I kept the ticket stub because that movie just spoke to me. And I was like, this can't be possible. He says, well, what she has in the movie, I don't know if you guys ever seen that movie. It's with Cameron Diaz. And she shaves her head because her daughter has cancer.
Yes, like I can't remember the movie like that, but I know of the movie you're talking about. I definitely do.
If you have time and you ever want to see a nice movie that's going to get you emotional but very family oriented, My Sister's Keeper. Mm. So I was very emotional because now it clicks what he's telling me because I have a visual. And I said, how sure are you? He said, and he points to his degree, I am very sure on that. And I said, okay, what do we do now? He says, you need to take a test. We'll get the results in about 2 to 3 months. And I said, okay. We did the test. We waited 2-3 months and it came back negative. Mm. And we did biopsy, skin biopsy, because he was still sure that my son has this condition. And it came back negative and negative and negative. In the meantime, my son has had, at that point, maybe 60, 80 different kind of blood tests done. We did a generalized, when you have a baby in a hospital, they do a general, like 20, 24 type of genetic conditions that are more common.
Yes.
And like Down syndrome, that came back all clear. No abnormality. So after that, it was a long road ahead. We don't know what he has. We have to fight for this new test, but insurances don't like to pay. But if you want to pay for it, you can. Mm. Well, unfortunately, it was a lot of money. And I try to go the insurance route. Number one advice is if you don't have insurance, you're screwed. I did the first one. I was willing to pay the first one. But I got the insurance to finally say yes after 2 denials. They said yes. We did it when he was, I want to say like 7 months. And waited about.
Was it?
Go ahead.
Sorry, how much was it?
That first test was probably about $2,000.
What?
Wow. And I'm sure the prices are changing now because the science is moving so fast, and now taking DNA is a lot easier. It's more available, but then it wasn't. This was 2013. Everything came back normal. So the microarray analysis tests for 300 conditions, not the 20 something, 300 conditions. So the normal, not so normal, a little bit more rare, and he came back no abnormalities. At that point, the doctor looks at me in the face and he says, well, the next step is a whole genome sequencing. And I'm like, explain to me, because if there's one thing I didn't do was pay attention in science. And I was a high school dropout. I had a GED. I was a teen mom. Like, you're not, like, talk to me in English. And he says, well, he pulls out a ruler. He shows me the ruler. And he says, you know how the ruler is, and you have all these little lines on the ruler? Now, imagine these little lines are your DNA. Now, it's not so simple as, 1 to 12 inches, and that's it. It is each one of those little lines in between represent each a strand. So can you imagine that this one strand, number 8, the tip of number 8 is missing, just the tip on the right side. And number 13, there's a space, real minimal, on the line. That's what they have to look at, every single detail in your DNA, which takes months. And at that time was about $10,000. So insurance was,
oh my God.
Insurance was a heck no. Never wanted to pay for it. So I said, okay. I got to the point where I was looking to pull out a loan, borrow money, pull equity from my house. Yeah. And the doctor goes, it's pointless. And I said, well, why is it pointless? Because we have to just treat AJ for all his conditions as they come. So if he has a fever, we treat the fever. If he has an infection, we treat the infection. We don't know what he has, and we'll just wait it out. I did that in the beginning, and I by his second year, I was like, I can't do this. My son was having weekly fevers. He was at 104. One fever was so bad that I witnessed my son. He was 4 months old. I witnessed my son's fever at 104. Unfortunately, it was the same day he got vaccinated. I watched his eyes go in, and they never came back up. I watched with my own eyes his eyes go in from the shock of the high fever, and he was cross-eyed after that. He had never been cross-eyed before that. My son has been wearing glasses since 4 months old. To this day has had 3 surgeries, 2 major eye surgeries. And I'm just talking about the eyes. I'm not talking about surgeries anywhere else. At that moment, between the fevers every month, he's 2 years old. And I'm like, so what am I supposed to do? Just never know what he has? There's people that go their whole life without knowing what they have. I didn't know this. Wow. While my son was turning 2, I was Googling as much as I could. I went back to college. I decided to go for my GED to an associate's. I studied psychology because my goal was to work with families eventually and become a genetics counselor, because I felt like I didn't have the support. Even though they had the title as a genetics counselor, I felt like I could do better than what I was being offered. So it moved me to studying and learning more about my son. And every day I will educate myself more. And my biggest advice to all parents is jot down all your questions, all your thoughts, how your child is doing, whether they're good things, bad things, questionable things. Write it down. We as parents, we live busy lives and we forget these things. When you see a doctor, they are mandated to spend 7 minutes with you. Wow. Sometimes they spend a lot less than that. The only time they spend more than that with you is when you, the parent, come in with the questions. You, the parent, tell the doctor what's going on, and you, the parent, advocate for your child. So I learned that my role was forget college, forget everything else. I don't need another degree. I got that degree, but I don't need another one because I'm just going to advocate for my son. I'm not going to sit back and relax. I learned that there's over 7,000 rare diseases out there that have names, and there are an enormous amount of conditions with no names and no evidence. And he falls under that category. So he has multiple conditions that we have names for. Like, it took me 7 years to get a diagnosis of autism, even though we've known he's been autistic his entire life. No, he's ADHD. It took me 7 years to get that. And the reason it took so long is because the doctors said he first needs a genetic diagnosis, because that's number one. Genetics is number one. And then we can diagnose him with other stuff. But my son may never have a genetic diagnosis, so he's never going to qualify for therapy or anything else because we don't know what his genetic condition is. I've had to fight insurances, all kinds of things. And he was born with microcephaly, which is a small head size where your head does not grow. So his body continues to grow. And because he's pretty slim and petite, he fits with his head size. But a lot of people are familiar with microcephaly when you talk about the Zika virus, where your just head is not growing, you get developmental delay. Seizures are very, very common. He has absent seizures. His jaw never grew out. So he has a recessed jaw, so it's pushed back. So his upper lip is over. It looks like a really big overbite, which he'll need jaw surgery for. He'll need 2 jaw surgeries. We're waiting for him to get a little bit older. He's 9 now. So it's been one big journey. We have a lot of conditions that have been diagnosed, but we still have no name for what he has.
Wow. That's so insane. I feel like sometimes when you can at least know, because my mom was very much like that. Like when we would go to the doctor, she'll be like, just get to the point and tell me what's wrong. Because I feel like that's how sometimes as women, we work our way back to the solution. It's like we chase our steps and we're like, okay, this is where we can fix something, you know, or at least go into like acceptance, like, okay, this is something that we cannot fix, but we can accommodate everything else in our lives. So I think it's very difficult to not have a clear diagnosis to know what's wrong so that you can be kind of like more helpful, you know? I feel like that's really difficult.
Extremely. I feel the same way. I feel like I count my blessings because he's active, running, talking. He's doing everything a lot of doctors said he couldn't. My son was in all kinds of therapy, still needs physical therapy to walk better. But he could run. He'll jump on the trampoline park. He swims. He talks. He laughs. He dances. He's a trip. He's witty. He's so smart. And we did the whole genome sequencing, and it came back where I played myself, honestly. I volunteered to research study in the National Institute of Health in Maryland. And it turned out that they just took my child's information and they never got back to me on anything. They said, oh, we didn't find anything, nothing that we could give you evidence of. I get that, but at least give me the marker.
Right.
Let me know that this marker came back up normal, but there's no evidence. And I would understand that more because it gives me a peace of mind that, yeah, we found something that's irregular, but we don't know no more information on it. That just gives me a little bit more hope, right? Mm-hmm. So I just feel like, you know, like what you said earlier, I would feel much better being able to have a plan. After 4 years, the doctor told me, you know, there is no plan. We have to continue to just address these things as they come. And, you know, unfortunately, he looked me dead in the face and said, unfortunately, one day, you know, it'll be an emergency. You'll end up in the hospital. And it may click when it's too late.
Damn.
Why would he say
just like that? So I said, so I'm supposed to sit here and just wait. I was already dating my now husband, and he lived in Georgia. And we were deciding on our long distance relationship. Shall he move to Miami or shall I move to Georgia? I investigated the hospitals here, and best decision ever. These hospitals are the ones that said, what do you mean you need a diagnosis genetically before you get ADHD and autism? He is autistic. He is ADHD. He is this. We're not going to lose hope. We're going to keep fighting for a test. We're going to keep fighting insurance, and we're going to find answers. And at 7.5 years old, I found out that we found 2 abnormal variants in his DNA. One is very little bit information. It is a protein enzyme that has been linked to severe intellectual disability. But if you know my son, he wins every award in special education and general education when it comes to reading and math. So to have that as his marker, for him be the complete total opposite is like a miracle. Wow. And then the second abnormality has only been linked to infertility in men and prostate and a few other cancers. So he has a high, he's at a high chance probability of getting cancer. He knows he's disabled. One thing that I always recommend, and it's coming out in one of my books, is being honest with your children from the beginning. Don't ever lose that parenting in you. You know, when you have a baby and they're learning to walk and you're teaching your child and you're like, this is your left foot, this is your right foot, let's put on your shoes. The same way you approach that, I approached, maybe because I knew he was special needs, maybe because I was older. I would say, we're going to the doctor today. Today, this doctor's going to check your tummy. I wasn't that parent, because I see this very frequently, that denied what we're doing, you know, keep it a secret. Then they, you know, kids develop that fear. They're not born with fear. They develop that fear because we place that fear in them to not want to be at the doctor's. Yes, they're going to get a needle. Yes, they're going to do this. But if we're open and communicate with our children, they'll learn eventually, like, well, you know, I get to spend time with mommy, or I get to spend time with daddy. I get to get pizza afterwards, or French fries, or I get to go to the park, or, you know, I get to, you know, not go to school today because I got to go with mommy to the doctor. It's not like my son goes to the doctor's happy and he understands, and I mark the calendar, and I made it a routine very young. Yeah. And I think mostly is because, you know, I knew that he was going to be going to the doctors for the rest of his life. But I do see how it worked way better than kids that I see every day. I had an older daughter that I would have to drag her into the dentist, drag her into the doctor, bribe her. And even the bribes didn't work. But when my son is very different, you know, because I think teaching him early on what to expect, they're not our enemies. They're here to help us, you know.
How did How did the father handle it? Like, how was that support and his, you know?
It took the father, I want to say 8 years to finally come to terms with everything. It led to our divorce, which parents, whether married or not, statistically, parents of special needs children, it is extreme high percentage of breakups, divorce, because one parent usually handles the information a lot better than the next parent. One parent is usually the advocate, the pushing towards the answers, the doctors, the therapy, the stress. The other parent is not. And even if both parents are on board, children in general, typical neurotypical children in general, put pressure on relationships. You know, some people say, oh, it made our family stronger, but it made your family stronger because you went through some shit. You know, whether it's how we're going to eat today, or, you know, I didn't sleep the last 4 nights, it's your turn. Whatever it is, whether it's, you know, super big or super small in your relationship, you know, it's challenging. And having a child with special needs is 10 times that, because now it's therapies, it's doctors on a weekly basis, it's less sleep, it's medications, it's, did you do this? Did you fail to do that? Are you not helping me? It's all me. I'm drained, or I'm neglected, you know, because now my focus is on the child only. And we do that typically as parents, moms especially, we focus on our children without special needs. And we were like, okay, I got to wheel it back in. You know, I got to still be sexy for my husband. I still got to put separate time for my man, and vice versa. But when you have a child that requires 25 hours out of the day, it's like, where do we stand as a couple?
Yeah.
And that puts a huge strain and financial burden. With insurance or not, it is extremely costly. I don't care if you have state Medicaid, it still costs you money.
Right. Sorry, I'm just processing it all. You know, I really admire you and I respect you and I appreciate you sharing all this. You know, a lot of us, I'll be honest, take for granted, you know, what we have in front of us as far as in what we perceive as quote unquote hard or whatever. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like you just kind of take for granted even yourself, you know what I mean? On these things that you don't understand, like you don't know that if you didn't have this part correct, like this would ruin a whole domino effect of other things, you know? Or we're so used to like all of our five senses, and if one is taken out, we don't think about how that would affect everything else, you know? Like it's just so many things, you know, and I'm really, I've been so interested when it comes to genetics and all these things, because when you start learning more about history, you start realizing like how much our people migrated all over this planet, basically, you know, and things were infiltrated by a certain class of people, whatever the case is, like what happened after that, you know? Like what happened to our DNA? What happened to our structure as humans? Like, is this what we looked like even before? Like, I feel like if we ever saw the picture of the first human, it would look completely different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, than right now.
They're altering DNA every single day.
Yes. That's wow. So how has it been for you? Like, how have you been able to decompress from all this? Do you decompress? How do you take care of you as being the mom that's in the forefront of all this?
Well, for a long time, I just put myself into it even harder, finding an answer, finding the questions. How else can I give back? Whether it's in my community, helping in the hospital, volunteering, giving back to children in need, other moms in need. I found myself interpreting at no cost and communicating with moms, because I would sit in the cancer clinic with my son doing blood work on a weekly basis and doing treatments. And they will be Spanish speaking parents just saying, yeah, to whatever the doctor's giving them. And I'm not saying don't take the treatment, but you need to know what your child is taking. You need to know why you're here every week with me. Like, why are you sitting next to me in a hospital chair for 6 hours a day, and you can't even tell me in your native language what your child has? So I found myself just trying to, diving in deeper. And then I decided one day, many years ago, my daughter had a project in high school about writing a book. And I made the book about her brother. And I helped her with the project. And then that project turned into my dream one day. And I put it on the back burner. And honestly, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't even be the author that I am right now, because you pushed me. And you were like, you could do it, Marlene. You could write a book, and you have a story to tell. And I do have a story to tell. And my motto behind the books were a few things. One, my son had several medical conditions. And if I wanted to describe, my son sees about 17 different specialists, right? He's been put under 16 times. He's had more than 500 blood tests done on him. If I wanted to find a book in the library or the bookstore that made my son feel like he can relate, I couldn't. I would have to buy at least 10 books to talk about 10 different conditions. So I said, you know what? It's kind of like a movie where wonderful movie, but the cast has one minority, one African American, and one Latino. And the one Latino is always the maid for some reason, right? I wanted to change that narrative. I said we have a story to tell, and even though I've been given what most people would think is a negative story, I said I'm going to change that narrative. So I started a children's book series called Superstar Heroes, and I plan on writing as many books as I can. But my first book, I put 6 different children, diverse children, 6 different disabilities, with the common goal of having inclusion all in one book. I wanted my son to see himself, and I didn't want a child with autism to have to pick up a book only about autism. I want children that don't have special needs to be able to read a book about children with special needs. It's something that I think has to be taught from home. I think that the same way we prep our children for the real world and different things and bullying and everything like that, I think that we need to prep our children at home about all kinds of topics that are out there. And special needs is not always visible to the naked eye. Yeah. You know, it's not always going to be a medical device. It's not always going to be something like that. So I wanted people to have more of an open mind on what being special needs could mean. So I made it kid friendly. I write it in English and I write it in Spanish. I give back. I make my son a part of everything. He understands. We have weekly Saturday conversations on his disabilities so that he can learn how to one day advocate for himself. And I make lesson plans just to teach him more about who he is. I do what I can with what I've already been given, because either I weep and cry about it, which I do. Depression is real. Mom guilt is so real, but I can't change it. And I learned something recently. Social media has been a therapy for me. It is a free way to market yourself, but I realized that when I go on talks, podcasts, interviews like this, it is a therapy session for me. I walk away feeling like a sigh of relief, like, oh, that felt good to talk about it today. You know, so I do that. And then I learned recently that what I've been doing all these years is really not self-care, because I'm just digging into what my reality is. I need to separate the work, the special needs, all of that to take care of me. I need to find something just for me, not for my husband, not for my children, not for anyone, but for me. And nails and getting my hair done, that's not self-care. That is a part of you know, grooming myself, but that's not self-care. And I'm guilty of the term that I heard recently was, are you taking the time to have self-care, or are you doing aftercare? And for a long time, I've been doing aftercare.
Ooh,
it is not self-care. Yep.
Damn, that puts a whole nother perspective on stuff, you know?
Yeah. I also like to say too that kids will be kids, and sometimes if you just take the time to answer their questions, because they're so curious, you know, like I've gotten like we don't take the bus now, so it's rare for us to, like, you know, be in the bus, but we used to take the bus together sometimes. And they would be like, oh, what's wrong with that person? Or they'll see someone with like vertigo and they'll be like, why is that person's skin like that? And I feel like as Caribbean parents, we'll be like, oh, that's rude. Don't ask, or don't.
Mm-hmm.
But in reality, if we answer their questions, they're so much more ready for someone else that comes into their environment like that. They understand. They might not even ask or acknowledge anything. And sometimes children just want to feel normal. Like they want to feel included, and that means not paying attention to what's wrong with them or quote unquote wrong, because there's not really a wrong way, but because it's different, sometimes kids get put to the side. So I think that you having those books, I'm full of goosebumps with like everything that you've been saying. Like I'm still trying to process also, but girl, you are amazing. And these perspectives, like Jen was saying, is helping us just be grateful for just not having to deal with even the slightest bullying with our children, or having issues with our spouses over like diagnosis, or playing the blame game. I hear that's one of the things that happens also when there's something wrong with the children that influences the relationship also. So the fact that you've been able to tackle all these things and just also give yourself the actual self-care is so important. Like your message is so heard today. And I'm sure everyone listening today is going to be like, wow, I have an amazing life. I don't have to deal with insurance companies every day. You know, like that's crazy. And you are up there, girl. I'm so glad that I know you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
And just, you know, how present you are about everything, you know, and I know you're going to have your moments. I'm sure that's human. You know what I mean? You wouldn't be human if you didn't, you know, but the key is like, we're all, and I've learned this through my journey with depression, is that you're going to have your moments. Like, you know what I mean? It's just, it's going to be like that. But how much of that moment do you let it, like, do you hold on to it? You know what I mean? There's Joe Dispenza that goes so much into like the mind. And he always says, like, let's say there was an issue today, right? And then you're feeling a certain way about it. And let's say like a week passes by and somebody's like, what's wrong? Like, you look like you're a little down, whatever. And then the person will be like, well, a week ago, I got some news that X, Y, and Z happened, and I'm still down about it. So he says basically like, you go from that point, and that's just like a little mood, right? And then as it keeps progressing, as you keep holding on to it, where it's like affecting your daily life so much, then it becomes a temperament. Then it becomes a personality trait. Like after years of holding on to something that basically affects
a snowball effect. Yep.
Yeah. So, you know, he says, you know, so it just gives, you know, my point is that light to like, the longer that we don't just go to the solution part, because we get so stuck in the problem. And that's what a lot of us in everything in life, like we get so stuck about the problem and talking about the problem. Like once you know the problem, your step after that is just solution based.
Yep.
Otherwise, you're gonna drag yourself into this dark hole. And I've been there. I've been guilty of it. You know, just life stuff. You know. Now add a parent. You know, when you're solely responsible for another person, there's already the general pressure of being responsible for a whole nother human being. You know, and when it comes to, you know, the health and everything, I also just want to give you your props on how you've introduced it to him, because sometimes the parents get so caught up in what they're feeling that they forget that the child is also going to feel something too. There's an energy they're going to see like, wait, but why is all this, you know what I mean? So
exactly
that you've been able to not necessarily smooth, but, you know, just kind of roll with it as you were rolling with it. You know, he wasn't like in another reality. You guys were all in the same reality. And I give you that. That.
It's been super challenging. But like you said earlier, you have to confront whatever situation may be. You know, mine happened to be my child's special needs, but I'm disabled myself. Like when I say disabled, like legally, Social Security standards, collect a check, disabled. But it doesn't stop me from doing the things that I can do, you know, and working for myself is something I can control my hours. I can give what I can on the days that I feel better, the days that I can't. But if you neglect or you pretend or you just continue to dwell on the problem, it's not fixing the situation. You know, it's like the saying, crying over spilled milk. I'm not saying it's not going to hurt. I'm not saying you're not going to cry. I'm not saying you're not going to go through depression, whatever it is, but you realize there is a problem. That's the first thing. And then what am I going to do? What steps can I take to help this problem? How can I help the problem? How can I fix the problem? Sometimes the problem is not fixable. My son's situation is not fixable. But what is fixable is my mindset.
Yeah. And that,
how you approach it.
Yeah. And you know what's crazy that people don't understand is that is probably one of the most biggest like currency when it comes to energy. It's how you handle situations. Because we can make ourselves sick with just our thoughts.
Oh, yes.
Like that has been proven. Like you can literally create a disease inside of your body just through thought. So I really feel like because of how you've handled everything in such a powerful way, energetically, I think that's why AJ has kind of destroyed the myth of like, this is what it's supposed to be for these type of children. Because I'm telling you, you interact with the child, you wouldn't think that he has a problem to the degree of what you're told. You know what I mean?
Yep. Because a lifespan, you're not thinking of a lifespan when you talk to him. Like, what lifespan are we talking about? He's gonna outlive you. And he'll talk, he says things himself that I'm like, he talks to me. I never talk to my son about death. I never talk to him about him having a short lifespan. I'll never. But he knows something that I don't know. And I've come to terms with that as well. And he'll look at me and he'll say, I'm not always going to be here forever, Mom. And I'm like, what? Yes, you are. Like, who told you that? And he's like, I'm just preparing you. And I'm like, what? Like straight out of a movie. He says things, and like I said, I do a lot of talk on social media and I may never even get feedback, but I vent and I give myself out there because I just got to get these things off my chest. And he has said multiple times, when I die, Mom, and I'm like, you're not going to die. What are you talking about? You're like 9 years old, kid. And he's like, I know. But, just don't know when God's going to call me home. Whose kid are you? What are you saying right now? So it's things like that. I myself took advantage of things I used to see or hear in other people. And the one thing that being a special needs mom has taught me is to humble yourself and never judge anyone. We're taught very early on not to judge a book by its cover. And I don't mean it in the sense of you see my son and you see his handicap. Don't call him a handicap. Don't laugh. I'm not talking about that. I, as a mom, have been out in different cities and have seen a kid act out. 3 years old, 6 years old, 8 years old. Mm-hmm. I've seen a kid tell their mom, I don't care. I don't love you. I hate you. And I'm like, oh, if that would have been my kid, oh, shoot, I would have smacked the itch out of that. That was me before a special needs child. Now me, I'm like, I don't know what that child has. You think it's bad parenting. When my son screams because he's in another mood, my son is verbal, but there's kids that are not verbal. And for 4 years, my son said not one word. For 4 years, he didn't recognize me as mom. For 5 years, he didn't call me mom. But when I see other kids lash out this and the third, in my mind, no judgment here. No judgment on the mom parenting, no judgment on the child. I don't know if the child could have nothing developmentally wrong with them, right, but they maybe have trauma in their home. Yeah. That child may honestly not be happy with their parents. And as disrespectful as that may be, because if my kid in my mind says, I don't like you, Mom, guess what? That kid has the right to have an opinion. That kid may be ticked off that day. That kid may be like stressed out because we think as adults, kids don't have stress. Yeah. BS. They go through everything. The difference with these children, especially children on the spectrum, my son is a literal child. When I say that even now at 9 years old, he's learning because I'm teaching him heavy. Therapists are amazing. I love all the therapists in the world. But therapy is only therapy for that session. We as parents have to go home and practice. You don't do it, that therapy means nothing. Facts. My son will come home and literally play with his brother. His brother would be like, AJ, watch out, you have a mouse on your head. And my son would be like, a mouse, and start hitting his head like a maniac. And we had to teach the brother, stop playing tricks on him. AJ believes everything. He doesn't understand. If he's watching cartoons, he thinks that those characters are behind the TV somewhere. He did not understand. Everything to him is exactly how it is. If you tell him, I'm going to the moon, he's going to be like, how are you going to the moon? Do you work for NASA? Have you been practicing? Have you been studying? I didn't know you work for NASA. Like, that's, his brain is like that. He can't alter it. And you need to tell him exactly what you want. He came home one day, and I'm going to give you this last example. It was Tuesday. Routine is everything to children with special needs, not just on the spectrum. A lot of people think it's just a spectrum thing, but I have a cousin with Down syndrome, and you can't tell him something you're not going to commit to. It's a huge disappointment. So it's a huge disappointment with kids in general, but imagine one that's just super more emotional and going to tell you how they think. I taught my son Taco Tuesday. What was that for? He can only eat tacos on Tuesdays. He refuses to eat a taco on a Thursday, refuses to eat a taco on a Friday. No big deal. Well, he goes to school, comes home from school, and he says, Mom, it's Tuesday. You got to make tacos for my teacher. I bought him tacos after school. On Tuesdays, when I'm not making tacos at home, I'll buy him some tacos from Taco Bell, give him a taco, go home and cook some rice and beans. He says, Mom, I need tacos for my teacher. I'm not buying tacos for your teacher. I already bought you this. You need to cook tacos for my teacher. Cried, had a meltdown, went to sleep angry, so mad at me. Huge meltdown. You know why? Because his teacher told him during school, Antonio, today's Taco Tuesday. You bringing me some tacos tomorrow?
Oh my God.
So from that day forward, his teachers know, don't ever say anything that you do not mean to my child.
I think that's, man, there's like,
it's crazy.
That also shows you like how the system is not created specifically for the individual needs of every child. I have a little sister that her father passed away when she was 7, and then her grandfather had passed away when she was 6, and she never got time like to grieve. She had to go back to school as if nothing happened. And I feel like it's so crazy how we ignore all these like life situations or traumas that these children go through, and then we just force them to go back to school like nothing happened. You know, so it just goes to show how like just a simple statement that a teacher is saying at school can affect the child's whole day.
Yeah. And it's even just, I feel like with my children, like anything I say, they take it very literal. Like, and I always feel like if I say something to them and I promise them something, I have to come through with it. Like, and if I don't, I am straight up like, I apologize. I know I told you this, so give me tomorrow and then we're going to do it. Okay. Because this is what happened today. Like that, I communicate with them, because one thing about them, and it's crazy because a lot of times with these children, we get so stressed because we're trying to do other stuff while we're, you know, with them. And a lot of these children just want your time.
Yeah.
They just want your undivided attention and time. And it's like, what we don't notice is that, like, I was just telling my husband this, I think it was today or yesterday, that I was watching these videos from this psychologist, and she always talks about, like, she gives like reenactments of like a child and a parent. And then she talks about like how the parent is responding to the child, and then what's actually really happening to the child in the process of that, of like what you're molding them into and the type of person. So what I realized in seeing those videos, outside of the fact that I, first of all, after going down the rabbit hole in that lady's page, I felt like the worst parent in the world. I was like, hell, I got a lot of shit I got to learn. I was like, Greg, we doing this shit all wrong. Let me show you this. And he's like, damn. I'm like, yeah, got to make some changes, bro. So, but what I noticed is that a lot of it is just the fact that we don't know the psychology of the brain. Like when it comes to a baby, a toddler, a child, we are so conditioned into this idea because a lot of us came from that era where we had to grow up pretty fast. So by 5, 6, these early ages, we're doing things that we're technically not supposed to be doing, but we were giving that responsibility. So now we look at our children and we're like, well, by that age, I was already by myself. Well, by that age, I was doing X, Y, and Z. And it's like, hold up. None of this shit was normal.
Yeah.
That is why 90% of us are fucked up and it's hitting us in our fucking 30s and our 40s and the shit is hitting. And we're like, what just fucking happened? So it's like, I think that every parent, I know that we talk about Lama's class, we talk about all these other things, right, to prepare for birth and all these other things, but nobody wants to continue that conversation about what happens after that. There is no like open thing about always hearing about parenthood. Dude, that shit is not easy.
It's not.
Like, it's not. It's just like, there's no, I feel every parent, before you become a parent, you should study the psychology of a baby, an infant, a toddler, and the whatever, you know, as they get older. You should study the psychology of how that's different if it's like a special needs type of child. There's all these things that I think that, okay, if we know what would happen with this type of child, if all the genes are in their form, right? So if this is off, how does that affect this part of this growth, of that growth? And if we would do that, we would have more compassion with ourselves and with these children on how we deal with them when they're just being children.
Yeah.
Children.
For sure.
That's the biggest thing. Like, I think that having studied psychology for me has helped me grow as a person. And it piques my interest, not just because of my son, but just in general, you know, and how people think, and how to approach things, because everybody is different. We all are different. We all learn different. We all think different. We all act different. And you have to realize what works for you. I'm sorry to hear about your niece having lost her dad and grandfather, but that is a prime example of when I said, when the kid is lashing out, it's not always that the child has a developmental issue or a handicap, especially it could be a trauma. Yeah. You know, you don't really know what anyone else is going through. And if we address our children and we're honest and we talk to them, it is okay. Let them ask all the questions in the world. Yeah. Keep asking me. I'm going to keep answering, you know, because my husband's side of the family always tells me, you came into our lives for a reason, because after my son, he was the first child I brought into this family with a special need. Now there's 2 other children, and they think that I led the path to understanding, to like, you know, asking questions, answering, and they feel so comfortable now embracing, not that they wouldn't embrace the children anyway, but it's a different kind of like, oh, we with this now, because we're so used to AJ and everything that you brought to the table, like we already know how to handle this, you know what I mean? Yeah. It's just answering those questions, making your children feel heard is extremely important, and sticking to your word is so important. It has taught me to just be more of an adult, more reliable as a person in general, because I can't say I'm gonna do something and not do it. Yeah, you could say sorry to your kid 1,000 times. Oh, my bad, I couldn't do it today. I was working outside. I'm gonna do it tomorrow. But when you have that child that's holding you accountable and looking you in the face, like, for what? And if I tell him something, he'd be like, but you know, on the way home, we could have stopped. We could have went there. We only needed to take 6 minutes, because my son will tell you to the time. Wow. You know what I mean? So it just, he made me be a better me, you know? And I'll say it again, you know, what could have been my sad story, our sad story, has turned out to be a journey. And when I made the decision to write the books, my theory behind my company, my nonprofit organization, and my company, I said, my son may never know the name of his diagnosis, but I'm going to make sure that the world will forever know his name. And that's how I live by. So every day I push it. Every day I push it. When I have no energy, right before this podcast, I was TikToking. My butt is about to be 40 years old. Okay, I'm over here doing a dance. I got no business dancing on TikTok, but you know what? I reach people. I've met doctors in different states. I've done interviews. I've done radio interviews. I'm in the school system, like I'm reaching people, and however form I have to do it, I'm going to do it.
I love it. I really love it.
Yes.
Yeah,
I'm still full of goosebumps.
We don't understand that with our children. A lot of times they're just activating certain triggers, not intentionally, unintentionally, because they're just being themselves. But because we haven't healed in certain things, we become projectors and we're just projecting on our children. And that takes, a lot of accountability, and that's kind of the path that I've been on just in general, like just realizing like these are different types of humans and they're not the product of what I was raised, of this and that. They have a whole different reality, and I have to be able to adapt to that reality and handle it better on how I handle just the stress of children. Like children can be a lot, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's not
and like you said, Jen, also about getting to know what they're truly supposed to be like at those ages. Because like there was something that used to happen to me sometimes, like just because that's the way I grew up, sometimes I would end up yelling at them, and Milan would do this thing where she would cover her ears. And then that was like very interesting to me, and I looked it up, and it was like basically once you yell to a child that age, they automatically stop listening when it gets too loud. So it doesn't matter what I say after that. That's it. She's totally disconnected from the moment. So I've learned that learning how they respond to certain things, how they get triggered by certain things. And also one of the main things is that they honestly do not listen. They will literally just copy you. So if you can be that example for them, you can solve so many different issues. So basically backing our talk with action, which is very difficult, by the way.
Right about that. Damn,
but you know what? That helps you with exactly. Growth in yourself and relationships all around. This new era of Marlene that y'all are getting was definitely not me 10 years ago. Was definitely not even 5 years ago. Like I have developed so much, and it has helped me even be happy in my marriage. Like I'm going to face the world, like happier in my relationships with my loved ones, my friends, my cousins, my siblings, everybody. Because it's like, you know what? I learned to take advantage of everything around me now. Things that we take for granted every single day. Like after my son, I don't have time for the back and forth. Like, man, I'm going to tell you how I feel. I'm going to be as literal as he is. I'm going to give you my opinion. Hopefully we can move past it. And that's it. You know what I mean? Like,
let me tell you something. We have been together. We were cutting school together. We were
all kinds of stuff.
Dance together. Like this is how far back like we go. And we came from Brooklyn. The streets wasn't easy. We were getting into fights in school. Like it was wild. And like I just gotta say, I'm pretty fucking proud of us. We turned out pretty good, girl.
Definitely, I second that.
Like we were in some shit at one point, man. But I'm really proud of us. And I've always told you this. I became a mom at 34 years old. Or 33, I got pregnant. She became a mom at 16. She got pregnant. So I've always admired that you were just like a dope ass fucking mom. You're like, don't matter how young she was, Marlene was always just doing it. She did what the fuck she had to do. Point blank, period. Like we were out there clubbing, getting stupid, continuing our mess, and she was literally a fucking mom, yo. Like handling her responsibility, no matter what came at her, and then to see afterwards, this journey that you go into with AJ and how you've handled it with so much grace, so much strength, so much wisdom, so much knowledge. Like I've learned so much today. And like, you know what I mean? And it just, like I said, it gives us a different perspective on life and about children and about parenthood and how to handle these different journeys that we're all going to go on. They're not going to be all the same. They're all going to be different. But this journey does have joy in it. And I say that all the time in every episode. It has joy in it. And we got to really find the joy in every single experience that we have with ourselves, with our children, with our mates, with our friends. Like there is a joy in everything. Like this conversation was therapeutic for you, honey. It was therapeutic for me. Like, and I just thank you, like literally thank you. Like I respect you. I love you. And I sincerely appreciate this conversation today. And it's crazy because we had a little, like, we've been trying to get this episode going, you know, and it happened at the perfect time though. Like,
I think so too.
It happened at the perfect time. There were certain things I went through with my children that this conversation totally changed how I handle those situations moving forward. And that whole stuff you mentioned about like aftercare and self-care, man, that one hit deep. That one hit deep, man. I really, really appreciate it. I have just one more question for you. How was it with your husband, who's not AJ's father, and him taking on a child that is like AJ? How was that transition?
So I want to say the key to that was transparency, being very upfront about the situation, being upfront about the amount of doctors I see, the not having the diagnosis, the maybe never knowing, walking around with a bag full of medicine, all of that before we ever moved in, before I ever relocated to Georgia. And I watched him for a year be supportive, be active, interact. And when I moved to Georgia, I was married to AJ's father when he was conceived. And I could count in one hand how many times he presented himself to the doctors or the surgeries. There was many procedures he was not attending. And yes, he worked, but he also had time. You know, there's something called FMLA. He could have did a lot of things and didn't. It was just no, you know. My husband now, AJ's stepfather, he has been to everything possible. He has even taken my son to appointments when I couldn't because of work. And that for me was hard to swallow because I'm never not there. But I was new at the job at the time and I couldn't. And he has been there. He is researching things on his own time and sending me things. He is following hashtags and he sends me videos and pictures and links and companies and promotions. And hey, look, I found another company that represents microcephaly and there's an autism walk coming on. Do you want to go? He is the ultimate. He is the ultimate. I literally hit the lotto. And it was in due time. I deserve it.
Absolutely, she does. Yeah, girl. Hell yeah, you do for sure. Please tell everybody the page they can follow you at for AJ. Tell everybody where they can get the book, the name of the book, and all that good stuff.
So my page is www.theswankids.com. SWAN stands for Syndrome Without a Name. That's the name of my company, the SWAN Kids. So my son is my SWAN kid. And Helping Swans Co. is my nonprofit organization, always accepting any donations. Reach out to me because I don't just sell books. I literally have my certification to interpret medically in Spanish and English. I give back. I am now completing a class on behavior technician so that I can assist parents with behavior therapies. I do this on my own time so I can help as many people as I can. The name of my children's book series is Superstar Heroes. The first book is called AJ Goes to Camp. And I just want to say, like I said earlier, this session and this podcast was extremely therapeutic. in more than one way. But, you know, every once in a while, you forget how far you've come. And I just want to always say thank you, because when someone gives you your flowers while you're here, it's beautiful. So hearing you say these positive things about me was like, whoa, you know, is she talking about me right now?
Oh, yeah.
So I just want to say thank you.
Of course, man. You know I love you, girl, forever and ever.
I love you too. And I'm so thankful for this connection. This is not the first time we all three are on the line and chatting it up. And it is so free flowing. And I love to do this. And, you know, anytime you have a topic that I could chime in on, I'm here.
Yes, girl, we got to get you back so you can talk about the teen pregnancy. You got to tell us that story. That's a whole She got a lot of stories.
I do.
Inspiring, though. Very inspiring, because she always comes out on top, and that's what I love about us. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I hope you guys have a beautiful, beautiful Monday. I hope you had a beautiful Monday. Tap in with us. I will leave everybody's social media links and how you can purchase Marlene's book and how you can support her cause and everything that goes on with AJ. Make sure to follow her as well. She posts so many things and keeps you updated on basically his progress and her progress on just finding out more stuff about him. Thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you, ladies, for joining us. Peace out.
Peace out.